Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 32, written by user janisdg, who's taking care of mentally challenged individuals. One of them has a physical outburst, which leads to knowledge they wouldn't have received otherwise. Several years ago, I was working at a group home for developmentally disabled men. We're talking grown men with the mental capabilities of a 2 or 3-year-old. I loved every one of those guys, but one guy in particular, let's call him Jack, was adored by everyone, but had psychotic tendencies. He occasionally tried to kill people. He was very strong, but not very coordinated, so he never actually succeeded. Jack was having a very good day. None of the usual indicators that he was going to be aggressive in any way. It was a Monday night after dinner, and we were sitting in the living room playing and talking. Jack was smiling and laughing, so I wasn't on guard against anything. Suddenly, he jumped up straight and punched me in the jaw. It wasn't very hard at all, but he immediately fell over. Like I said, no coordination. And hit his head on the wooden arm of the sofa. It split his head open just a little, but he bled out a lot. I restrained him and he calmed down almost immediately and started apologizing. Usually he'll take about an hour or more to calm down and then apologize profusely. A quick examination and we determined that he needed stitches, so we packed him up and headed to the ER. The doctor came in, applied a little glue instead of stitches, and everything was right as rain. Waiting for paperwork and discharge, I heard a familiar name being called out in the hallway. My father-in-law's name, to be exact. Let's say it was Mike. I made sure the other staff member could handle Jack and went to check on my father-in-law. I saw my father-in-law being wheeled unconscious into a room. I grabbed a passing nurse. "That's my father-in-law. What's going on?" The nurse told me that Mike had had a massive heart attack and most likely would not make it. She also told me that his wife was in the lobby. Now, Mike's wife, my wife's stepmother, is a straight up bitch. She had called her daughter Mike's stepdaughter, and that's it. She hadn't notified my wife, Mike's only biological daughter. She didn't call Mike's mother. She didn't call Mike's sister. She didn't call anyone on Mike's side of the family to let them know that anything was wrong at all. Before anyone says that she may have been too distraught or worried to call anyone, she had a new boyfriend less than 2 weeks later. If she was distraught, it was only because Mike was paying her bills. I called my wife to let her know. She called the rest of her family. I went back to Jack and the other staff member. We got Jack checked out and back home. On the way back to the group home, I said to Jack, "Well, little buddy, I guess you did your part to get me where I needed to be. Thank you." He grinned real big and gave me a thumbs up. If Jack hadn't had that physical outburst and gotten hurt in the process, it literally could have been days before Mike's family knew anything about his heart attack and death. Case notes, file number 32. This is a great, though sad story, even though I'm not entirely convinced it was a glitch per se. Coincidences do happen. Yet, Jack's reaction seems to indicate he knew something deeper had happened relating to your life, at least on a subconscious level. Almost like he was drip-fed the emotional state that was required to help you, without truly understanding why. So I'd chalk this up to either coincidence or a spiritual connection. And by spiritual, in effect, I mean obtaining and processing information from beyond our own universe. Maybe connected parallel universes. Versions of ourselves that have more information or different information. The magic of this is our inability to explain the why or how of it, at least for now. Case file number 33, written by user Spike Rutland. His wife had a stroke. She survived. But then one day she hadn't. Then she was back. What's going on? 8 years ago, my wife had her first stroke and was hospitalized for over a week. I never left her side. Despite a huge setback caused by an incompetent nurse, she'd taken my wife's blood pressure while she was sleeping, and it was normal. Severe high blood pressure caused by stress was a diagnosis, so she'd pushed for my wife to be released the next day, but when she woke up, her blood pressure shot back up. The nurse tried giving her several injections and pills to bring it back down so she could be released, and the stress of it all, possibly plus the meds, caused her largest stroke yet. One of her eyes looked like it was going to pop out of her head. She was incoherent, and it was terrifying. Her mom and I were both in the room. She was stabilized and released about 2 weeks later. At home, I became her constant caretaker, which I am to this day. A month or so later, I went out to get groceries. I did this with my car, which was a black Honda Element. It's important to note that my mother-in-law also drove an Element, but it was orange. I loaded the groceries into the car and drove home. My wife's mother came out to meet me. We lived with her mom after her dad passed away in 2010, in a panic, asking where I'd been. I was confused. I went out to get my wife food, Mom. Then the look she gave me was of absolute pity and grief. She called back into the house, to my wife's adopted brother who was also living there. "It happened again! Come help get him inside." Then she looked at me, hugged me, and said softly, crying a little, "Honey, your wife passed in the hospital a month ago. We were both there. You sold your car to pay for her funeral. That's why you borrowed mine." I stared at her, pulled away, and whirled to look at the car I had just been getting the groceries out of. It was her orange Element. What? There were no groceries in the back. Our black Element was nowhere to be seen. My brother-in-law came out and tried to get me inside as the full weight of reality hit me. My wife was dead. Not waiting for me in our room with our cat. She was dead, and I would never see her again. As the screen door closed behind us when they got me inside, I felt a jarring sensation. Suddenly I was back in the car, the black one, mine, in the parking lot at the grocery store, having just pulled the driver's door closed with some force. That was the jarring sensation. I looked in the rear view, groceries. This was definitely our car. I pulled out my cell and called my wife. I woke her from a nap and told her what I'd just experienced. She was freaked out but comforted me and reiterated that she was okay and I'd see her when I got home, which I did. Case Notes, File Number 33. Is this the basis for insanity, I wonder? Imagine this happened to you, but you didn't switch back to normal reality or your perception of it. You'd feel crazy because, by all objective evidence, you believe the entire contrary to reality for a few hours minimum. And most curiously in your account, your mother-in-law and brother said you had done it again, meaning that this has happened to you prior in that reality that you switched to temporarily. You believed your wife had survived when she hadn't in that version of the world. But what does this tale reveal? Have you switched between universes before without remembering? Or is it the you in that alternate play being switched into constantly by other yous from even more parallel realities? My goodness, is this perplexing or what? Why do these switches even happen? We need to figure that out because it seems to be increasing in frequency. The author responded to my message. That's kinda what I got from it too. That forgetting my wife was dead was a common thing in that reality. It's not unheard of. In a different comment on this thread, I talked about how my mother-in-law bought a new car with part of her husband's life insurance payout, but bought the specific car she did because it would be able to haul my father-in-law's music equipment to his gigs when he'd been dead for several months at the time. I think that's what was happening to me in that reality or dream or vision. And that concludes our stories for the night. If you enjoyed them and my narration of them, consider leaving a like. I also enjoy reading any comments you may have. Let me know. And finally, subscribing is a good idea. I upload Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 6 p.m. EST. I'll see you all there.